Welcome to the Retail is Detail podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hamer. This is where we go beyond the headlines and get into how great retailers and tech innovators really think, from trading to teams to business building to tech, loyalty, and data. Every Monday afternoon, I talk to the people building, running, and reinventing retail, unpacking what's working, what's changing, and what's next. If you care about the detail of retail, you're in the right place. Today, I'm joined by David Woodland, Chief Operating Officer at Rowen Group, the Newcastle-based company behind Rowen Homes and Pink Boutique. David's career spans retail operation roles at Dreams, Couplands, and Benson's for Beds, and he's now heading operations for one of the Northeast's fastest-growing digital retail groups. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Jamie. Good to be here.
David, can you talk us through what you do day to day as COO of the Rowen Group and what makes Rowen Group different?
It's quite a wide remit, I'll be honest. So I was initially brought in to work across warehousing and distribution, the customer experience teams, and our physical retail store. A lot of my background was from physical retail. And since then, the role has broadened somewhat. So I look after two brands now, whereas initially I was hired to look after one. So I look after both Rowen Homes and Pink Boutique. And I also look after the digital infrastructure team as well. So that sort of full stack, tech stack, everything from front end Shopify development all the way to WMS integrations and everything in between. So yeah, pretty wide variety of tasks I get up to on a daily basis.
Awesome. What takes up the majority of your time?
I think the biggest surprise is probably the digital element. Initially, I was going to be looking after that, and then suddenly found that actually it takes up quite a lot of your time, from scoping out a new solution to testing it to making sure it's the right thing for you. It's going to give you the efficiencies you need to wrapping that up and evaluating it afterwards. It's all, you would think technology would be fast, but it's not always the case. If you want to do it thoroughly and right, it can eat quite a lot of your time, and there's a lot of internal stakeholder management with that as well, and a little bit of change management comes along with it. So that would be the thing that eats a lot of the time. Initially, it was the retail store, to be fair. I came into the business and there wasn't a vast amount of retail experience within Rowen Homes, and the store was brand new. As with anything brand new, there's a lot to get right and a lot to move forward. And initially, that ate up quite a lot of time, but store's in a great place now, and I'm finding less and less that I have to be in there, which is good because I can concentrate on other revenue driving activities.
Awesome. Well, you started out on the shop floor. So what lessons or people from that time shaped how you lead today?
There's a few different people I've worked with throughout time. I mean, you're right. I sort of grew up in retail. I'm not sure anybody plans it, but you sort of land there and you realize you're quite good at it and you crack on, and there can be quite a good career for you. But there's some, really influential people along the way. I remember working at Dreams and we had an L&D manager there. My divisional manager there at the time were really sort of influential and supportive people in making me realize that I was actually pretty decent at it. And then most recently, working with people like Andrew and Alice, our owners, who they surprise me every day at how much they're just willing to have a go at stuff. And I'm a little bit more naturally calm and reasoned and want to think things through, and they're very fast paced. And I think it's helped me strike a really good balance because I was probably a little bit too hesitant. They've really brought that more reactive side out of me and that willingness to try new things quickly. So they've had a big impact too.
Amazing. And what was the moment you realized retail operations was the career for you?
That's a tough question. I don't know when the moment was, actually. I think I finished my A-levels. I went straight into retail. I started earning a few quid, as you do. And then I got a couple of promotions and then started earning a few more quid and thought, actually, I'm not that bad at this. I think actually it probably ended up not being about money. And when I realized that I could coach people quite well and I could influence people quite well, and I was good at getting the best out of other people. And I couldn't really think of a career that would enable you to use that skill better than what retail could. It's a huge people environment, and if you're able to get the best out of people, I think retail can be a very fruitful career for you.
All right. So still a people business.
100%, yeah. That's it's always my main focus. I think sometimes you can lose sight of it, but my core value sits around the people in the organization, really.
And what's the biggest operational headache that you've solved recently?
Biggest operational headaches. I mean, we're in the middle of a huge ERP switch out, so I think that's everyone's biggest operational headache, to be honest. So from a technical perspective, I would say that, and it points back to some of the things I mentioned earlier around that stakeholder management piece, that getting to a point where you think, are we doing the right thing here? Like, are we, just before you hit the button, are we going to get the bang for buck that we want from this? And then I suppose other end of the spectrum, we're two massively quick growing businesses that have warehouses that don't have flexible walls. And we've got a certain operational capacity that is can become quite challenging. So there's been some very inventive solutions around trying to get around that, and whilst also having our eye on the rest of the property market as well, to see whether we can expand and get any efficiencies by potentially bringing brands under one roof. So they're two examples, but very different examples.
We work with a number of retailers at the moment who are undergoing ERP switches. What was the pain point that drove that for you, and what have you learned from the process?
I think we have a system, or had a system that was largely there to service one or two particular business areas, and there were other business areas that were growing to such an extent that they just needed a little bit of help. So if I point towards our buy and merch teams, for example, insights from our current ERP were not great. Level of reporting was not great, and just that ability to use data to inform decisions, whether that be around forecasting or products of the future, that wasn't there. And we, as we're getting to a point in our growth cycle that we definitely need that. That was probably the kicking point for us. And then from a WMS perspective as well, as the businesses grow, the number of orders that we handle grows. So we needed to gain some efficiency in our warehouse. We had to look at a project like this in order to be able to do that. So otherwise, you just end up adding people, right? We've gone from a systems first route to try and gain that efficiency. And then if we still need to grow after that and we still need bodies on board, we'll absolutely do that as well. Hopefully we'll end up with a solution that benefits us cross-functionally more than our current one does.
Okay. And how has that process been for you so far?
Long, arduous. It's fun, right? Because I'd never done it before. So it's, you're learning constantly. This is one business that I've worked in for 2.5 years now. I've never learned more than I have in this last 2.5 years. Growth curve's been huge, but you start getting a real cross-functional expertise in my role now, whereas previous businesses have been very retail focused or very operations focused. Quite different here. You start building a good picture across what every department does and what every department needs. And when you start introducing something like a new ERP system, you have to understand all of those business areas, otherwise you don't get the right tool at the end. So yeah, been long, hard process, but one that really worthwhile, and I think we'll really see the benefits of.
Okay, what advice would you give to retailers considering an ERP switch?
Best advice I would say is take opinion. There's lots of people out there that have done it before. Maybe don't think as conventionally as what you are led to believe when you start researching these things as well. So there are alternatives out there depending on the business and how you set up and how complex a business model you have. Doesn't always need a conventional ERP, if I'm honest. There's some really clever solutions out there now and some really bespoke app builds that might cost a little bit more in development time up front, but actually you can make them work around your business rather than having to work around an off the shelf solution. Definitely just talk to as many people as you possibly can, and be surprised how many other businesses will, if you pick up the phone or you make contact with somebody through LinkedIn, they'll have a conversation with you. It's not that difficult to make contact, so any expertise is welcomed.
Okay, so you talked to some other retailers that had undergone a switch recently.
Yeah, for sure, and particularly people that I knew worked with some of the platforms that we were looking at, because they had done the onboard and all the implementation. I think it's really important to understand what other people's pain points might be and whether or not you can handle any of them as well, because There might be clients that have got that ERP, that's great, but if they have twice the size of the digital team that we have, and they've overcome them problems because they had the resource to do it and we don't, that could be a bit of a deal breaker for us. I try not to make decisions in isolation. I think as much industry expertise and as much experience as you can get, it's really valuable to do that.
Right. Who's getting it right in retail at the moment? What are some businesses that you admire?
I mean, I'm going to blow our trumpet. I think we are. It's a tough environment out there, right? It's a tough market. It's a tough economic climate, particularly when I think about fashion. There's a lot of struggles out there, and we've got two thriving businesses here that are definitely booking trends, and they're they're growing at a phenomenal rate. So I think we're getting it right. You don't get it right every day, but I think if you zoom out and look at over the course of a longer period of time, we're definitely getting it right. I think there's a lot of people struggling, and it's through factors out of their own control, if I'm honest. I think it's getting tougher and tougher for business, economically, and the high street is not as it's not quite what it was. But I'm going to stick with us. I'm going to say Rowen Homes and Pink Boutique. We're doing it right.
Okay. That's awesome. So majority of things going right. What's something you've gotten wrong that you've learned from?
I think probably early on in my start here, we moved a little bit fast on some stuff and didn't quite scope it out correctly. So I'm thinking about a couple of platforms that we introduced to our customer experience team that in the face of it, we thought this will bring us into the age of AI. We'll start being able to respond to customers more quickly. And actually that the scoping wasn't quite what it should have been. And our motive was, let's try and get customers responded to quickly. What we didn't focus enough on was, let's get customers responded to in a quality way that will not only be timely, but will give them all the information that they need. And that we ended up rolling that project back and then going again with a different solution afterwards. So I think the lesson there for me was take a little bit more time to plan. We were reacting to a really tough time. We were reacting to a lot of volume. And it was a good example of something not quite right first time.
Gotcha. So do it properly, make sure it's fit for purpose, make sure you're not rushing and diluting the customer experience as a result.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
Outside of the obvious profit and efficiency goals, what does success look like for you at Rowen in the next 12 months?
I think in 12 months' time, if I can walk through the office and everybody's looking like they're having as good a time as what they're having now, I think because you genuine, it's quite infectious here. If I'm honest, I've not worked probably in any place like this where everyone really seems to enjoy what they do. You always have some plodders, don't you? You always have some plodders that they're quite happy just in their role, and they don't necessarily want to excel, but they're not trying to disrupt anything either. It's quite interesting here that everybody just wants to absolutely do the best job possible, and I believe that when I walk through the office. I think it's just such a nice environment where you feel like you can get on, you feel like you can progress. If you can't move up, you can move sideways then up. There's always opportunities opening up for people. And from an L&D perspective, we're a very open business. If there's an opportunity for someone to better themselves or to develop some new skills, some new knowledge, we're really, really open to doing that and opening those doors for people. And I think if we can maintain that culture in 12 months' time, whilst achieving the growth that we are, I'll take that as a real win. Really, that's why I come in every day. I come in every day because it's great to be here. The fact that we're doing really well across the two businesses is kind of just an additional bonus for me.
Okay, cool. And what are some things or some processes that Rowen really gets right to develop that kind of culture?
Internally, I think we've just got really good cross-functional relationships. There's not really many decisions that are made in isolation with anybody. We also turn up to the office quite a lot. So we do have a hybrid model like a lot of businesses do now. But one of my indicators of how much people like being here is the fact that I come in and actually there's a good amount of people in the office every day. We like sitting in meetings together in person. You'll often see me at the corner of somebody's desk asking questions. I'm not a huge believer in too much electronic communication. I like going sitting in a room with somebody. And we do that well as a business. And the minute there's some change coming, I feel like we're communicating really well. If we've got a particular task at hand, we're around the corner from that peak period that everybody's looking at with great ambition. We plan really well for that. And that's across every single department. There should be no surprises when you land on Black Friday, for example, no curveballs. And I think we just keep getting better and better at that.
And are retailers generally spending on the right tech at the moment, or are they getting still caught up in shiny demos from SaaS vendors?
It's hard to avoid them, I'll be honest. I mean, my email inbox is full on a daily basis, and it can be hard to separate the wood from the trees sometimes. I think it's an easy trap, right? It's what I would encourage everybody to do is think about what you actually need, because everyone's chasing the next big thing, right? You can either be different as a brand and you can have a different product offering, or you can try and do things differently. And I think if you try and do both, things can get very complicated very quickly. We have some brands here that are very different. They kind of stand out in the marketplace. But technically, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. If you can do the basics really well, if you can deliver to the customer really well and at a successful rate, if you can offer all of the things that you would expect of a home furnishings retailer, for example, in terms of service and guarantee and warranty, then you don't have to come up with something shiny and new. You can just deliver on that really well, and you'll see the results of it. And that's really helped me when I've got an email inbox full of people wanting business from me to be selective about what I think could actually add value.
Well, that makes us here at Loxa even more honored to be working with Rowen Group. Can you talk us through how Rowen sees that relationship?
I was from a furniture background, as you alluded to earlier. So I knew the power of being able to offer something like Loxa to the customer. And initially, when I was onboarded, I'll be honest, I didn't know who you were. I'd never heard of Loxa before. I'd heard of the names that you hear frequently in the marketplace. And we'd had conversations with a couple of those, and they were technically very clunky and a little bit archaic, I would say. And then you guys sort of burst onto the scene. And as with anybody who lands in my email inbox, I was always skeptical at first, and keen for you guys to prove the concept to me. And I think after being onboarded with you now for, I actually don't know how many months, Jimmy, you can probably help me. But after this amount of time, I think the relationship's gone really well, I will say. So some of the things I've been surprised at would be the attachment rate and the uptake. I think with a few tweaks on site and with making sure we land the message with the customer, I think we've seen some real benefit of that. The thing I'm more surprised at is how quickly you guys resolve stuff when we've got an issue or when we need your focus on something. We're talking within the hour here, which I'm pretty sure if I was with any other provider, I wouldn't be getting responses within the hour. That's been a huge surprise to me. And that's probably been the quickest win actually from this relationship, is that level of trust that's helped to build up.
Really appreciate that, David. Can you talk us through your approach to headless commerce, or why you've chosen to centralize or decentralize platforms across the Rowen brand?
Oh, I'm not sure what you mean. Can you explain that one a bit more?
Oh, okay. So just, I guess, the centralization of functions across the Rowen Group. How do you choose which functions to centralize across the brands and which ones not to?
I suppose in my technical world at the minute, it's sometimes just around resource. So if I think about like Shopify development, for example, we haven't been in a position for the last couple of years where we would pay a developer and we would in-house that. So it's a lot of the time it's led financially, and whether or not we want to, whether we have enough workload for that particular individual, or whether it's better just to use an external agent or an agency for that. I'd say 9 times out of 10, that is probably the decision. Sometimes things are just short-term projects as well, and once they're implemented, they're implemented. So it's not always the best solution to have a permanent resource.
Okay, that's great. How do you decide which parts of the customer journey to automate and which ones to keep human?
With some pretty thorough testing now, I would say. The key for me is that it still feels personal. I don't think it necessarily has to be obviously a human. As long as customers are informed, they're generally happy, right? As long as they know what's happening every step of the way. And we have some products that, you order them, you might not get them for 10 weeks. They're made to order sofas or made to order beds. And nobody likes to drop a bit of money and then wait for 10 months and have 10 weeks, sorry, and have no contact. So information and being informed is really key. I think where we do have human contact, it should be the more complicated or the higher stakes issues where the customer really just feels better speaking to a human being, and or sometimes just being able to raise concerns with a human rather than a chatbot or something like that, and I think we just have to pick and choose those intricacies and think about the customer's mindset at the time. If there's been an issue, you really just want to get it resolved, and you want somebody who can make a decision rather than something that might just stick to a process. You want somebody that can exercise a little bit of discretion. So we would gear up more towards human interaction from an after-sales perspective, usually, and from a pre-sales perspective, we would probably look to automate as much of that as possible. But the two aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
Is that a lot of the conversations we've had with e-com experts around customer acquisition versus customer retention? Do you see the benefits in customer retention from making that a human experience?
I definitely do, yeah, because I think pre-sale, there's almost an expectation that you aren't gonna get a phone call these days, unless it's perhaps in a more sort of B2B environment. But I don't think anyone necessarily expects that. But from a post-sales perspective, I think the power behind, if someone spends particularly highly, or if someone just has quite a complicated order, might not be thousands and thousands of pounds, but if it's just a complicated order with lots of different items and there might be a couple of different delivery dates in there, the power of just giving somebody a call to say, okay, I've noticed your order's come through. Thank you very much for your business. And I just want to talk you through the next steps and just let you know exactly what's going to happen in case it wasn't clear on your order confirmation. That can leave a really powerful impression, and remove any doubt and just give confidence, especially for brands like ours who aren't necessarily high street names yet. They're not mainstream as I would describe them. So it just gives people that faith. And then, we've noticed really in the Northeast, since having a retail store as well, that consumer confidence really grows. Having a retail store, I think, people see that and they're like, oh, actually, that is a brand I can trust, and it's got somewhere I can go and speak to a human if I need to. So I don't really like to underestimate that the power of the human interaction.
Okay. And how do you make the physical and the online speak to each other? What are the pros and cons of omnichannel?
I think the pros are most people now start their journey online, right? There's always an element of research now, or quite a lot of time there is. The fact that we have like a really niche product offering, it's quite a glamorous range we do at Rowen. I think because we have that, it doesn't necessarily need to start in one place or another. We're in the Metro Centre, right? So we're going to get lots and lots of people walking past every day, lots of people going in store who may not have actually started their journey online. They pick a product up in their smaller accessory and they don't realise we sell furniture. They don't realise we sell beds. They don't realise we sell sofas. And if we can signpost that customer to a website, and so they can view that extended range, that's great. And that happens really frequently. Within our marketing activities now, we've taken store really seriously to start sending people the other way, because from an average order value perspective, if a customer can go in and see and touch and feel things, they're a lot more likely to place things in a basket, right? So I think the two work hand in hand really well. Where some of the friction lies is store managers want their sales, right? And e-com managers want their sales. But I think having a really solid culture where people do have that really great communication and they've got that trust in each other, that we wake up in the morning to try and do the right things. We haven't really had a lot of that here. So, but I think that would be a watch out for that e-com and bricks and mortar blended brand. You've really got to have that cross-functional trust to be able to pull that off well.
And Rowe Group is expansive in terms of its estate, right? Are you looking to open new stores? And if so, what will be the key considerations on where and how?
We're a business that really, we will invest carefully, and we'll invest in the areas of the business that we think are going to drive the biggest results. Our store's done really well. It's grown at quite a rapid rate over the last 12 months. There's definitely an argument for more stores, and that's not just because they can be really good revenue drivers, but actually the exposure it gives the brand in those geographical areas, that is a real help. There are other things that we could invest in as well, right? We can invest in ERP switch outs, we can invest in bigger warehouse premises, and that allows for a wider range, and that wider range could drive revenue as well. So I think that's probably part of our discovery over the next few months, is deciding where best to invest so that we can see the biggest returns from that.
Right. And obviously you have to make these tough decisions, but where are you thinking, like, in general, retailers should spend more? Should it be around better product pages, faster fulfillment, cheaper returns, systems? What's the dream investment?
I would actually say retailers, especially if it's physical retailers, it should be in their people. I think there's a big truth in the fact that retail is difficult at the moment, and it's hard out there on the high street. There's no denying that, for sure. And the economic climate's not helping that. But I think when that happens, what you inevitably see is slippage elsewhere, and training slips, and quality of service slips. You can walk into a lot of retailers now who probably used to be quite niche in terms of the service levels that they gave. And you would walk into a particular retailer and you would know that you were in it just from how you were being interacted with, and the level of service that you were being given. And I think a lot of that's been lost. And I know it's something we strive for daily, is how do we feel like a luxury brand, and how does the customer feel like the visitor a luxury brand when they walk in the door and out the door. And we constantly aim to try and get that right. And I would actually say, if anyone wants to focus anywhere, and on something that largely is not expensive, that would be where I would focus, because the huge difference really in that customer retention and trust is how the customer feels when they interact with you. If it's a good interaction, they'll probably come back, and if it's not, then they probably won't. And I like to boil things down to a simple level, because I'm quite a simple man. That's ultimately where I get to.
Awesome. On the flip side, if you had to choose one item from the P&L you needed to cut to survive, what would be the first cut?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Cut to survive. Some of my colleagues might listen to this, Jamie, so I don't know whether I want to. I don't know whether I want to do that. I think probably we're a business that still travels a lot. We travel for a number of reasons, whether that be to visit suppliers, or whether that be to look at product, or whether that be to like shoot on location. I think there's some inventive ways we can probably get around that now. And from both an environmental standpoint, a cost center, there's been some huge advancements in AI and how we can represent product on site without necessarily needing to travel the world to do it. There's a lot of UK suppliers as well who are really high quality suppliers that we could definitely look at expanding that base. Technology is helping you to not only have to travel so far, but to get things to market more quickly, perhaps, as well.
Nice. And when did you last change your mind about a major strategic decision? What was it, and what made you change?
I don't change my mind very often. Usually, once it's made up, it's made up. But I have wavered a couple of times in the ERP project that we've talked about. So yeah. I've gone from we're definitely doing this to we're definitely not doing it to we're definitely doing it again. And in that order. And I think that's one learning for me throughout the process of not being afraid to change your mind. Because I think right up until you own the business, you're scared of what somebody might think of you if you change your mind, or if you commit to something and you say it's a great idea, then you want to prove it's a good idea, right? And I think you have to be willing to walk away sometimes and think, you know what, this is, the more I found out, this is just not right for us right now, and I'm gonna draw the curtain on it. And although we haven't, one thing I've learned is that you have to be ready to, and ready to hold your hands up and say, that wasn't a great idea, on to the next one. So that's not a direct answer to your question, but it's kind of an answer to your question.
Yeah. Well, so you've got to keep things balanced, take new information into account, be open to changing your mind, but mostly be stubborn. So
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sustainability, huge retail conversation. How do you operationalize sustainable delivery packaging systems without blowing margin?
We're really, really selective about which partners we work with, right? So we don't fulfill most items ourselves. We work with delivery partners for that, and we're very careful about who we select. So one area that we probably could save money, in all honesty, but we choose not to. Firstly, because we work with some really sustainable partners, but secondly, because the quality of service is there with them as well. And I know that things will get delivered right first time rather than having to go again. That's one of the reasons we don't change, and we make we choose the right partners for that. Internally within the business, we do absolutely whatever we can to be as sustainable as possible. So anything from the packaging that we receive deliveries in, the packaging that we send deliveries out in, that's reviewed at least 6 monthly, from a commerciality perspective and a sustainability perspective. And, both businesses are getting to such a size now where small gains and incremental improvements there make huge differences on the back end. Huge focus for us. Unless businesses start tackling things like this today, it becomes a real problem for them when they're suddenly huge and you have to reverse engineer some of these processes out. Best to catch it when you're early in your growth phase.
Yeah. What's your view on buy now, pay later for furniture and higher average order value? The premium furniture like Rowen often sells. Is that a big growth leader, or is it a returns time bomb?
I think usually for the furniture industry, it can add growth. You've got to be really selective about your proposition. You can certainly attract the right and the wrong people depending on how you pitch that proposition. If you were heading into the market with a huge APR, potentially you might just be attracting the wrong customer there. We don't want people to overstretch themselves with product. We'd like to be able to just offer a range where people can access luxury without necessarily having to pay a luxury price tag for it. Equally, on the other end of the spectrum, you could offer interest-free credit, and you might just move customers who were willing to pay and could afford to pay into credit. And that really doesn't have much of a benefit on anybody. So I think you've just got to pitch the proposition right. And it's an area that we've just recently moved into as well, offering a credit facility to customers. It's one that we're still tinkering with, I would say, in terms of what proposition to offer. When is it a lever to pull? So what I mean by that is you don't want to be in promotion all year round, right? Or a lot of the time you don't want to be in promotion at all. You kind of want the product to speak for itself. But is there a financial proposition lever that you can pull that unlocks that sale for customers, who just makes it a little bit more accessible and allows them to manage their money better? We're trying to strike a balance with that, and I think we'll go through a bit of a learning curve with it, I'm sure. But that's an area where I would say to reach out to people who have done it, because there's a lot of people being offering credit facilities for quite a long time in the same way. And when I see something new or that I'm not used to seeing on the market, I'd be really interested to speak to that person. So if anyone listens and they've done something inventive around credit facilities for customers, be very, very interested to pick up a conversation with you.
Awesome. We'll look to have some credit and finance experts on the podcast as well.
That'd be great.
What single action should every retailer take this quarter if they want to be taken seriously in 2026?
Plan the whole quarter. It's very, very easy to look at the next peak trading stage. So if we were looking at the next few months, we're talking about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but we have a business model that encapsulates both low ticket and high ticket products. So we've got people thinking about home improvement now and having their home ready for Christmas. And then we have Black Friday, and then we have Christmas, where suddenly that mindset will move to gifting. And then before you know it, we'll hit Boxing Day and it'll be Boxing Day sales and it'll be furniture and beds and sofas again, and it'll be that competitive landscape. And I think you have to plan all that together, because unless you look at that in its entirety, you think, well, what are we going to do Black Friday? And you do something, and then you think, oh, well, what are we going to do on Boxing Day? And suddenly you're just in promotion all year round. And,
Yeah.
and you've had a huge impact on margin and potentially sort of devalued the brand a little bit as well. You have to look across the whole quarter, especially at this time of year, and think, well, what is the best thing to do at every individual time? Or what's the best balance for customers? And what do people want at that time of year as well? Almost choosing the battles that you can win within that overall quarterly planning, rather than that, what is the next peak and how are we going to address that in isolation?
Mm. Yeah, thanks. It's all right. Listening to you. Also, Dave, we're going to move on to the part of the podcast that we ask all our guests. So firstly, I mean, you've worked in retail your entire life, started on the shop floor, but what detail of retail do you like the most?
I love the psychology of it. I love what really makes a customer say yes to something. What makes one sales advisor convert at 25% and another at 15%, and how can we coach those little, what words they use and how they conduct themselves in order to be able to measure and improve those aspects. All these little details, they're a bit like in performance gains, they're like puzzles to me, and I really like understanding behavior of both customers and sales advisors so that I can try and drive performance around that. It's always interested me. I'm convinced it's why I'm still heavily linked to retail. It's one big puzzle that I always think, and it's a bit like going and playing golf. It's the endless pursuit of perfection, right? There's just always something you can improve on and you can make better, and it just keeps me hungry. So that's psychology, the customer, and the psychology of your colleagues is something that is that I would say I like the most about retail.
And what detail of retail would you change?
What would I change? I think there's probably a little bit of a misconception that people in retail are not quite as skilled, perhaps, or they're there by default. I would argue that some retail and operational managers, they're the best and most skilled and well-rounded managers that I've ever come across. I mean, these guys are always looking for performance gains. They're counselors, they're problem solvers, marketeers, they're commercially minded. They wear a lot of hats. And there's a lot more than just opening the door in the morning, putting the tills in, and then closing up on a night. It's a really broad role that I think retail managers specifically have. And they often have to fight to be taken seriously across the sector and across businesses. So personally, I think we can learn a lot from retail managers. I'd like to see a time where they're the CEOs of the future, because they're often very, very good with people and they understand them well, which I think is a key characteristic. So yeah, that'd be one thing I would change.
Awesome. Don't underestimate their attention to detail. What is your most controversial prediction for the future of retail?
I would say that people will crave bricks and mortar stores in the future more than we think they will. Human connection is just such a psychological benefit to people. And we've seen trends across multiple sectors, right? We've seen vinyl records replaced, and then suddenly now everybody wants to be in a vinyl record store talking to the guy behind the counter. We've seen bookshops replaced by Kindles, and other e-readers are available, by the way. But then suddenly everybody wants to be in a bookshop because it's cool, right? And they want that human interaction. And I think there'll be a resurgence where people are living a lot more of their lives potentially in a little bit of isolation. They're working from home. That human contact is less than it once was. And I think shopping just becomes a method of socializing for many. Me as well, actually. I spend a lot of my life in isolation. And I like going shopping, and weird for a guy, I know, but I like going shopping. And I think sometimes if you can get a really quality conversation going with someone that you don't know at all in a store, it can be quite revitalizing. So I think there'll always be a place for bricks and mortar retail, and I think it might actually come back to us a little bit.
Awesome. What's a detail of bricks and mortar that you can really appreciate in another store?
In another store? Yeah. I spend a lot of my time looking at watches. That's a vice of mine. And the variation between visiting one jeweler to another is pretty huge. And I think it's very much a technique. And I've worked in retail for a long time, right? And I'm under no illusion what these people are doing, but they're always very interested in me, in a particular retailer. They're always very interested in me and what I'm up to, and they want to have a conversation. And actually, I believe that they're not necessarily looking for me to buy something that day, but they know I'll go back because I have a great relationship with them. And I think that's something they're really getting right, and everybody could learn something from that. It's not about that day's conversion; it's about the retention of that customer and the relationship that you've built up with them. Yeah.
Nice. And what's your craziest story from working in retail?
Craziest story. I don't know if they're all podcast worthy, Jamie.
Everything's podcast worthy.
But we'll aim for one that is. Do you know what? Do you know one thing from when I actually started in retail? And I won't tell you which business it was because I'll give away all their secrets. But it's probably a little bit taboo actually. But the weird and wonderful ways in which people would shoplift. It's some of the. It's so eye-opening working in retail. The inventive ways people will come up with to steal things, and that can be that's not always necessarily the customers either. That could be staff. You know, I remember things being thrown out in rubbish bins and collected later, and I remember people very neatly folding football shirts under their waistband and down their legs so that they could get away with it. You know, all these just. You know, you would never, the normal person would never think of doing these things. But that's always surprised me, and always, it's sort of left a cynical element in my mind where I have to really work on trusting people. That's probably one of the craziest examples I've got of things I've seen over the years. Nothing surprises me anymore, if I'm honest.
That's why you got to employ great people.
This is exactly right. Yeah. And make sure they're happy and comfortable in what they're doing as well. And you know, I think we get that right. And when we're not, I'm sure people will feel comfortable enough to tell me as well. So yeah, both really important.
All right. David Woodland, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Been a pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of Retail is Detail. This episode was brought to you by Loxa, the Klarna for insurance, protecting every retail customer everywhere. We support retailers in offering product protection on all major platforms, online and in-store, on all insurable categories. Visit loxacover.com to find out more. You can catch previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or at retailersdetailpodcast.com. I've been your host, Jamie Hamer. Thanks for listening, and see you next Monday.